Janeway's in her ready room, but some things are a bit off. She's talking to a potential client about fighting their enemies for them, and I note she's wearing leather gloves, like what evil people do in science fiction. The addition of more closely cropped hair and a hint of menace leads me to suspect this variant has a small but very dedicated fanfic community. While we're stopped, let's drag out the wheel and name our new character. The wheel decrees that your new name will be...
We put our faith in Blast Hard Cheese.
Volunteered by Lieutenant Faildray. Blast Hard Cheese says Voyager doesn't need to actually kill anyone, as we're technologically superior to their enemies, just intimidate them and kidnap their leader, Tedran. Dom Janeway asks what's in it for us, and is told there's a wormhole that might lead us back to the Alpha Quadrant. The data on where it is and how to stabilize it would be our payment for the mercenary work. After a bit of a threat, Dom Janeway agrees with Blast Hard Cheese and demands data on their enemy. To the bridge where, after a Kazon in uniform arrives, we note a distinct lack of Starfleet comm badges. I'd expected them to be replaced by a planet with a dagger through it, but that's not present either. As Dom Janeway gets into a fight with some ships from the people she's been employed to beat, she asks a more heavily tattooed Chakotay if we found this Tedran chap yet. Unsatisfied with the negative response, she decides making Tedran surrender would be quicker than finding them, so she wants to do some war crimes and use biochemical weapons on the largest population centres. Blast Hard Cheese realises he might have made a bit of a fucky by employing Dom Janeway, telling her the civilians are not the target. Hard cheese, you've given Dom Janeway a job and she's going to complete it the most efficient way possible, regardless of the corpses it leaves. She calls sick bay and we find the doc's had rather an upgrade. He's also finished fiddling with our guns so we can poop biological agents with them and go do some Geneva Protocol level bad shit. A heavily upgraded Voyager starts firing at a planet before the screen freezes and a voice breaks in. The voice is a guide and he's explaining to a group about the terrible warship Voyager and its destructive capabilities. He tells us how Captain Janeway opened fire on their world, referring to it as a point in history, so we're dealing with the survivors of whatever kicked off back in the day. He goes on to say that Tedran, the leader Dom Janeway was supposed to kidnap, according to this version, had already started evacuating the cities, handily avoiding wide-scale death and, presumably, the significant physical evidence that would have left. And finally we learned that this was all some 700 years ago for them, and what we've seen thus far was but the start of Dom Janeway's interference in their civilization during what they now refer to as the Voyager encounter. The host takes questions from the group, the answers to which are all inaccurate and paint Voyager as aggressors, before we return to the simulation on the screen. Dom Janeway's unhappy with how many people aren't dead yet, and a smirking Tuvok prepares to fire again. Blast Hard Cheese thinks that this is a bit much and wins a visit to the brig for his troubles. Dom Janeway will let him know when it's over. Down in sickbay we're engaging in a bit of the old torture. One of the guys Blast Hard Cheese employed us to fight has the location of their leader Tedran, and we want it. Violence from Kim and persuasion from Chakotay don't work, so Robo-Doc steps in and injects him with an acid to melt away his head. Curious way to make someone talk, but I guess he's the doctor. Well, Robo-Doctor. Looks like it worked, as Chakotay is telling Dom Janeway where the victim said Tedran was hiding. Chakotay is dispatched with Tuvok and an assault team to find him and take him prisoner. The people we're fighting have other ideas and teleport a team into Voyager's engineering section. Setting up a force field prevents conventional assault, but handily, Dom Janeway has some unconventional methods too. We call 7 of 9, who's also a bit different to how we remember her, not least of which because she's now technically a squad leader. The Borg give zero shits about things like teleporting through force fields or getting pooped at, and make quick work of the intruders. The good news keeps coming as Chakotay and Tuvok have managed to grab that Tedran lad and one of his mates and are bringing them back to Voyager. Dom Janeway gives orders for Blast Hard Cheese to join her for the meeting. In what looks to me like the set of the mess hall minus all the furniture, we greet Tedran. Briefly, anyway. Refusing to order his forces to surrender, Dom Janeway gets bored and just shoots the prick. End of war. What we just saw, the guide explains, was the start of an occupation by Blast Hard Cheese's people, some of whom are in the group looking a touch unimpressed. I suspect this story may have more than one version. Regardless, the guide says the struggle for his people to recover has taken centuries, and the fight for equality is still not complete. The group dissipates to look at some of the exhibits, one of which seems to be a firework from Voyager. As the guide gently admonishes an extra for looking with his hands, one of Blast Hardcheese's people from the group interrupts with a question. He wants to know how the guide can prove his story is true. He suggests our guide is using his people to explain away all of his problems, even going so far as to use a variant of the "I'm not racist, but" line, so you know he's a real catch. The guide tells him to get super fucked, as there's a data storage device that's just been uncovered in the ruins of a city, and it's definitely from Voyager. He'll be able to prove that this is all legit real soon, so dickhead. Later, when the museum is closed, the guide restarts his Voyager simulation. It turns out it's not just a screen, but a variant of holographic technology as he walks into engineering. He's got that data storage and thinks working on it with contemporary tools makes more sense. A little tinkering reveals that the gizmo has rather a lot of data in it. In fact, it's a complete hologram stored in a backup module. Gee, I wonder who it could be. The Doc's a bit confused by his situation, as he finds himself in engineering without his mobile emitter, and seeing the guide doesn't help matters. In fact, he tries to call the bridge to report a hostile intruder, suggesting the museum's version of the story might have some holes in it. The guide tries to calm him, explaining that everything's fine and he's in no danger, and everybody he knows is dead because 700 years have passed. The result is as you'd expect, and the Doc does some healthy scarpering. A slight problem though, his scarpering leads him into the museum. I guess it must have hollow emitters. The Doc's calmed down a touch and is trying to accept his situation, something not helped by being surrounded with bullshit like the reconstructed schematics, suggesting Voyager would have been a match for half a dozen Romulan warbirds. Oh, and the fact that he might be tried for genocide, what with the bioweapon that killed millions and all. If he's going to be put on trial, he should at least get the chance to see what they think he did, so back we go to the simulation. The war's still ongoing, and Dom Janeway is quite upset. Her bridge crew all offer shitty ideas and start squabbling, something for which she has no patience, and punishes a computer terminal. Her idea is to target the general population instead of the military, which is odd, as I thought we were supposed to have already done so, but let's ignore that for now. Robo-Doc offers to make some virus bombs, and Dom Janeway seems pleased by the prospect of a mini-exterminatus. The real Doc interjects with a minor observation, namely that this whole thing is complete and utter bollocks. He tries to explain that Voyager was a ship of peaceful exploration and altruism. Well, apart from all the wars we started, and that species we just condemned to extinction 2 episodes back, and that time Janeway straight up done a murder. If you don't count those, we're proper enlightened and shit. The guide wants the Doctor's version of events, and he obliges. We did get involved in the conflict, he says, but not in the way shown here. We were sorting a trade deal with Blast Hardcheese, minding our own business, until the guide's own people attacked us. The guide isn't convinced, not least of which because it places his own people as the aggressors. He wants the Doc to see the rest of his simulation and shows him the bit where Dom Janeway executes Tedran and his buddy. The Doc objects, obviously. She'd never kill an innocent man, except for that time when she did, or that other time when she did. The Doc recognizes Tedran, though, not as the martyr of oppression, but as a leader of the attack on Voyager. The whole simulation is revisionist bollocks, he says, and the Doc can prove it with data stored on his medical tricorder in the museum. Or not. The guide doesn't much like where this is going, and instead deactivates the Doc. The guide is allowing himself to explore those doubts the Doc gave him. If they were wrong about the Doc being a robot, maybe they got some other stuff a bit off too. As an aside, I see a familiar gizmo on the guide's desk. It's the main component of that V8 warp drive from 3 episodes ago, the one that could fold space. Whilst it's probably not an intentional inclusion, Voyager losing it on this planet would be a good reason why they didn't use it to get home. But again, I digress. By morning, the guide has finished contemplating what the Doc told him. He's ready to hear more and restarts the simulation, this time creating the sick bay, perhaps to let the Doc feel a little more at home. After a bit of piss and vinegar about being turned off mid-sentence, the Doc is assured that the guide will keep an open mind and agrees to cooperate. The Doc suggests writing his own simulation to show the guide what really happened. He agrees, and we jump to the result. Janeway's in her ready room talking to Blast Hardcheese. We've just finalised an agreement to trade some of our medical supplies for dilithium, and the Doc has them prepared in a cargo bay. Blast Hardcheese suggests we might want to complete our transaction with some haste, as they've had a bit of trouble with their neighbours. Naturally, now's the time for Voyager to be attacked, and 3 ships start pooping at us. Blast Hard Cheese suggests a bit of running the fuck away, so we try to do that. Before we can, Tuvok notices we have some uninvited guests in engineering. They're led by our old friend Tedran, in a pose that suggests he's never stood up before, let alone held a gun. Tuvok arrives with friends, and Tedran takes 7 hostage. Rather than just wide-beam pooping the lot of them, Tuvok lets them go. Perhaps not believing their luck, they decide to grab another hostage on the way out. Even worse, this one's an unknown extra, so now there's a chance of some actual danger. Tuvok reports to Janeway that 3 crew in engineering are dead, and the invaders have taken hostages. Unknown guy doesn't even get a name here, so there's a fair chance he's fucked. He says they're now on deck 2, which is pretty impressive when engineering is on deck 11. Guess they call them turbo lifts for a reason. Janeway, Blast Hard Cheese, and the Doc arrive on deck 2 for a poke around. Feels like a bloody terrible idea with people who've already done some murders, but she's the captain. The intruders and hostages turn up, and we have a bit of a stare before they leg it into the mess hall. Security teams are on their way, but balls to waiting. Janeway wants to go in now. For those of you asking why we don't use the Doc as an invulnerable tank to draw fire, it's your lucky day. He suggests going in first to do just that. Then the plan is immediately ignored, and we all go in together, so bollocks to it. Blast Hard Cheese tells Tedran that their conflict doesn't involve Voyager, though Tedran rather thinks we're being convinced to join in. Diplomacy goes pear-shaped when one of those security teams pops in, and 7 twats Tedran, causing him to drop like a sack of shit. Blast Hard Cheese proves his commitment to negotiation by shooting the bastard while he's down. Janeway can't stop him in time, and the Doc confirms Tedran now qualifies as snuffed it. Show's over, and the Doc pauses his simulation. The guide and 3 others, presumably some arbiters mentioned previously to judge the Doc's guilt, were watching with him. The arbiter of Tedran's people is, well, we'll call it skeptical, shall we? One of Blast Hard Cheese's people asks for evidence, and the Doc says he can provide it. The medical tricorder in the museum is the one he used to make sure Tedran was Dedran, so accessing that will show that he was shot by Blast Hard Cheese's gun. Tedran's arbiter isn't interested. She says it doesn't matter how he died, and the fact that he met his death on Voyager proves there was a conspiracy. We have a little argument about the current inequalities in their society, that Tedran's people are treated as second-class citizens. Tedran's arbiter wants the Doc taken into custody immediately, but is overruled by the other 2 arbiters, both of whom happen to be from the opposing species. Tedran's arbiter throws some shade at the guide for not supporting his people instead of the facts, then threatens the Doc before he goes off to work on the tricorder. To the simulated sick bay, so we can use Voyager's tools again. As they work, the guide and the Doc have a chat about Voyager, and how everybody the Doc ever knew is long gone. They're interrupted by the sound of kabooms, and the guide leaves to see what's going on as the Doc grabs the tricorder. Looks like some of Blast Hard Cheese's people have heard that the Voyager story might not be true after all, and have come to correct some errors with big sticks and grenades. Among them is that racist cockend from the group earlier, and the guide ends up floor-bound after trying to stop him. The Doc grabs him, and we go to find cover, leaving the tricorder on the stairs. In the morning, the fight in the museum is over. The same can't be said for the rest of the city based on the noises from outside. Looks like shit's got very messy. The guide suggests that this has been brewing for a while, and the Doc was just the spark that set things off. Which is why the Doc wants to be deleted. He's a symbol now, something to fight over, and there's a chance things will cool off if there's no definitive answer over what happened 700 years ago. But the guide doesn't want that anymore. He needs to know the truth. Even if it's not what he wanted, at least it'll cease to be an unknown that both sides can use to rile up their support. True reconciliation may never happen while there's still a mystery. The Doc agrees, and they start looking for that tricorder, as the camera pans to a window. There we see a group watching what we now realize was a simulation. The new guide tells the assembled group that this flashpoint and the resulting testimony given by the Doctor helped their 2 peoples to begin down the path to an uneasy peace and, in time, mutual respect and equality. And we learn that the Doctor served here for many years before deciding he wanted to try and reach the Alpha Quadrant, explaining to them that he longed for home before he flew away. Well then, This episode offers something new and interesting, with nuance and messy ethics and complicated morals, and that ending reveal was genuinely fucking genius. It pretty much ticks all of the boxes for what I want from Trek. Everybody puts in a great performance, except perhaps for the somewhat bizarre poses of Tedran, and nothing really screams that it was out of place, save for the existence of a backup of the Doctor. I'm willing to overlook that contradiction of existing lore for the strength of what's on offer. In short, it's excellent. I do so wish I could love it unconditionally. But I can't. Let's address the cultural problems around the evil versions of Voyager's crew. Having the evil variant of Chakotay feature heavier tribal tattooing is implicitly tying that tribal identity to his behaviour. The same effect of being slightly wrong could have been achieved by switching the side it was on or simply changing the design. By making it more prominent, they accentuated that aspect of the character when depicting a negative representation. For this to have been done in an episode about race relations is doubly tone-deaf. And he's not the only issue, as the shorter hair and mannerisms of the evil version of Janeway are examples of queer coding. It's not the first time we've seen that shit in Voyager either, as we were fed something similar in Warlord with a leather-clad evil Kez and the implied bisexuality. The ignorant bigotry of the Hays Code may have officially been dead when this was written, but its gravestone casts a long shadow. You've no idea how much those above points upset me, because this episode is otherwise exactly what I want. It's still, in my opinion, the best episode of Season 4 so far, but the inclusion of those problems I've mentioned holds back one of the best examples of the entire series to date. End of episode.
Hey, it's good to be out of that. What the fuck?